If you are a green card holder who travels internationally, what I am about to share with you could significantly impact your next trip to the airport. Starting this week, every single time you enter or leave the United States, you will go through a process that didn't exist before. And if you are from one of 39 specific countries, there are additional considerations you absolutely need to understand. These aren't rumors or speculation. These are official policy changes from the Department of Homeland Security that took effect on December 26th, 2025, and will continue rolling out throughout 2026. Whether you travel once a year to visit family or cross borders regularly for work, these changes will affect you. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what to expect, how to prepare, and what documentation you should have ready before your next international trip. My name is John, and welcome to Mahonash. Entry Status USA, where we break down complex immigration policy into clear, actionable information you can actually use. Before we dive into the specific changes, I want to address the anxiety many green card holders are feeling right now. When you hear about new enforcement measures and biometric systems, it is natural to worry. A green card represents years of waiting, significant financial investment, and for many people, it represents stability and belonging after a long journey. But here is what is important to understand. These changes are about verification and security screening, not about taking away your lawful permanent resident status. Green card holders still have the right to travel and return to the United States. What is changing is how that process works at the border. Let me be very clear about what we are covering today. I am going to explain three major changes that took effect in late 2025 and early 2026. First, the new biometric entry-exit system that now applies to all green card holders. Second, the expanded travel restrictions affecting nationals from specific countries and how green card holders are exempted. And third, the long-standing rules about maintaining your permanent residency that haven't changed but are more important than ever to understand. Everything I am sharing today is based on official DHS announcements, the Federal Register, and guidance from immigration attorneys. This is factual, verified information, not social media speculation. And at the end, I will give you specific steps you can take right now to make your travel experience smoother. Section 1. The Biometric Entry-Exit System. Let's start with the biggest change that affects every green card holder who travels: the new Biometric Entry-Exit System. On December 26, 2025, the Department of Homeland Security implemented a final rule that requires all non-US citizens, including green card holders, to have their photographs taken by Customs and Border Protection officers at every single entry and exit point. This applies whether you are traveling by air, land, or sea. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait, I've been photographed at airports before. And you are right. CBP has been using facial recognition technology at some airports for years. But here is what is different now. This is no longer a pilot program limited to certain locations. It is now mandatory policy that will eventually cover every U.S. port of entry, and it applies to both entering and leaving the country. The official name is the Biometric Entry-Exit Program, and it is something Congress has actually required since 1996. It just took nearly 30 years to fully implement. The system uses facial recognition technology that compares your photo to the one in your immigration records and passport. The goal, according to DHS, is to verify identity, combat document fraud, and track visa overstays more effectively. Here is how it works in practice. When you arrive at a U.S. airport, land crossing, or seaport, CBP officers will photograph you as part of the inspection process. The system compares that photo to what is already on file to confirm you are really you. The same thing happens when you leave. For departures, this might happen at the gate, at a checkpoint before security, or at the actual border crossing, depending on the location. For green card holders specifically, this means a few things. Every time you travel internationally, you will be photographed coming and going. The photos of U.S. citizens are deleted within 12 hours, but photos of lawful permanent residents and other non-citizens are retained in the DHS Biometric Identity Management System for up to 75 years. This creates a comprehensive record of your travel history. Now, I know some of you are concerned about privacy, and those concerns are valid. The American Civil Liberties Union and other advocacy groups have raised questions about this expansion of biometric surveillance. However, as a green card holder, you don't have the option to opt out the way U.S. citizens do. U.S. citizens can request manual passport inspection instead of facial recognition, but this exemption doesn't apply to lawful permanent residents. The rollout is happening in phases. Major international airports started implementing this on December 26th, but it will take 3 to 5 years to fully expand to all ports of entry, including smaller airports, land borders with Canada and Mexico, and seaports. CBP has indicated that they are prioritizing high-traffic locations first. What does this mean for your travel experience? First, expect the process to take a bit longer, especially during the initial implementation period. Border officers and airport staff are still getting used to the new procedures. Second, make sure your documents are in order. The system relies on matching your live photo to your existing records, so any discrepancies in your passport photo or immigration records could cause delays. Third, understand that this is primarily an identity verification system. It is not designed to automatically flag you for secondary inspection or create problems if you are traveling normally. However, the data collected does feed into CBP's broader screening systems, which brings me to an important related topic. Some green card holders worry that this new system will somehow make it easier to question their residency or create problems at the border. The biometric system itself is just about verifying who you are. The separate issue of whether you have maintained your permanent residency, which we will discuss in detail later, is evaluated based on different factors like how long you have been gone and what ties you maintain to the United States. The biometric photos are part of your travel record, but they are not the determining factor in residency questions. One practical tip: if you have any concerns about how your biometric data is being used, or if you believe there is an error in your records, you can file a complaint through the DHS Traveler Redress Inquiry Program, known as DHS TRIP. This won't exempt you from the biometric collection, but it can help resolve issues if there are errors in your file. Section 2. Travel restrictions and green card exemptions. The second major development you need to understand is the expanded travel restriction that took effect on January 1st, 2026. This is commonly called the travel ban, and while it primarily affects people applying for new visas, it is important for green card holders to understand, especially if you are from one of the affected countries. On December 16th, 2025, President Trump issued a proclamation that expanded travel restrictions from 19 countries to 39 countries, plus individuals traveling on Palestinian Authority-issued documents. This builds on an earlier restriction from June 2025. The proclamation establishes two categories. Full suspension applies to 19 countries, meaning both immigrant and non-immigrant visa issuance is completely suspended. These countries are Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Laos, Libya, Mali, Niger, Sierra Leone, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. It also applies to people traveling with Palestinian Authority-issued documents. Partial suspension applies to 20 other countries, meaning immigrant visas are suspended, and certain non-immigrant categories like tourist visas, student visas, and exchange visitor visas are also restricted. These countries include Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, Benin, Burundi, Côte d'Ivoire, Cuba, Dominica, Gabon, the Gambia, Malawi, Mauritania, Nigeria, Rwanda, São Tomé and Príncipe, Senegal, Tanzania, Togo, Uganda, Venezuela, and Zambia. Turkmenistan has immigrant restrictions, but more limited non-immigrant restrictions. Now, here is what is absolutely critical for green card holders to understand. You are explicitly exempted from these travel restrictions. The proclamation clearly states that U.S. lawful permanent residents are not subject to the entry suspensions regardless of your nationality. This means if you hold a valid green card, you can continue to travel and return to the United States even if you are from one of these 39 countries. However, And this is important. Being exempted from the travel ban doesn't mean your travel experience will be exactly the same as before. Green card holders from these countries should expect enhanced screening at ports of entry. Border officers may ask more detailed questions about your trip, your ties to the United States, and your residency. This is within their normal authority, and it is not a violation of the exemption. It is just heightened scrutiny. Additionally, there are separate processing pauses that affect applications for benefits. In November 2025, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services put a blanket pause on adjudication of immigration benefits for nationals of the countries covered by the June travel ban, and this was extended to the newly added countries. This suspension applies to things like green card applications, naturalization applications, and even citizenship oath ceremonies for people from these countries. So, while you can travel as a green card holder, if you have pending applications, they may be delayed significantly. Let me address a common source of confusion. The proclamation states that the restrictions only apply to people who are outside the United States on January 1st, 2026, and who don't have a valid visa. Some green card holders have asked whether their green card counts as a valid visa for purposes of this exemption. The answer is that you don't need to rely on that language because green card holders are separately and explicitly exempted as lawful permanent residents. The proclamation makes this crystal clear. Another exemption that is relevant: if you are a dual national, meaning you hold citizenship from one of the restricted countries and also from another country that is not on the list, you can travel using your unrestricted country's passport and you won't be subject to the enhanced screening based on the restricted nationality. For example, if you are a dual citizen of Haiti and France and you are a U.S. green card holder, traveling on your French passport would avoid the heightened scrutiny associated with Haitian nationality. For those of you who are not from one of these 39 countries, the travel restrictions don't directly affect you at all. You can continue traveling as you normally would, subject to the new biometric requirements we discussed earlier. One concern I have heard from green card holders from restricted countries is about family members who are trying to join them in the United States. Unfortunately, the current proclamation removed previous exemptions for immediate relatives of U.S. citizens. This means if you are trying to sponsor family members, they would be subject to the restrictions unless they qualify for an individual national interest waiver, which requires approval from the Secretary of State and is very difficult to obtain. The proclamation requires periodic reviews every 180 days to assess whether the restrictions should continue, be modified, or be lifted. This means the list could change over time, but there is no guarantee when or if that will happen. If you are from one of these countries and you are concerned about how this might affect your situation, I strongly recommend consulting with an immigration attorney who can review your specific circumstances. Section 3. Maintaining your permanent residency. The rules that haven't changed. Now, I want to address something that hasn't changed, but has become even more critical to understand given all these new systems tracking your travel: the rules for maintaining your lawful permanent resident status. I have seen a lot of confusion and misinformation about this online, so I want to be very clear. There are no new rules in 2026 that automatically flag green card holders who have been gone for 180 days or that calculate your presence on a rolling 3-year basis. Those specific thresholds that are circulating online are not part of any new DHS policy announcement. However, the long-standing rules about abandonment of permanent residency are absolutely still in effect, and they are incredibly important to understand. The basic principle is this: as a lawful permanent resident, you are expected to maintain the United States as your primary permanent home. If your actions suggest you have abandoned that residency, you could lose your green card. Let me explain how this actually works. Under immigration law, specifically Section 101A 13C of the Immigration and Nationality Act, a green card holder is considered to be seeking readmission rather than just returning to their residence if they have been absent from the United States for a continuous period of more than 180 days. Being treated as seeking readmission means you are subject to grounds of inadmissibility, and CBP officers can ask detailed questions about whether you have maintained your permanent residence. Now, this 180-day threshold is important, but it is not an automatic cutoff. Plenty of green card holders travel for more than 6 months and are admitted without any issues. The key is whether you can demonstrate that your trip was temporary and that you maintained ties to the United States. Step 3. Plan ahead for extended absences. If you know you will need to be outside the United States for more than 6 months, and especially if it might exceed a year, apply for a re-entry permit before you leave. The application process can take several months, so don't wait until the last minute. You must be physically present in the United States to file the application, though you can leave while it is pending. The permit will be mailed to you either in the US or at a US consulate abroad if you request that. When you apply, be honest and specific about why you need to be gone and how long you expect to be away. Common valid reasons include caring for an ill family member, temporary work assignment with a U.S. employer, completing education or training that benefits your U.S. employment, or handling family emergencies. Step 4. If you are from one of the 39 restricted countries, prepare for enhanced screening. This doesn't mean you can't travel, but it does mean you should be extra prepared. Make sure all your documentation is current and in order. Know that you might face longer wait times and more detailed questioning. Consider whether your trip is truly necessary, especially if it is discretionary travel during the early implementation period when procedures are still being worked out. Have clear, honest answers, ready for questions about where you live, what you do, why you are traveling, and when you are planning to return. Don't be defensive or argumentative with border officers. Answer their questions directly and provide documentation when asked. Step 5. Time your travel strategically. If you have discretionary travel coming up and you have been outside the United States frequently or for extended periods recently, consider postponing non-essential trips to allow yourself to build up more continuous presence in the U.S. This is especially important if you are planning to apply for naturalization in the near future, as citizenship applications have even stricter physical presence requirements than maintaining your green card. Step 6. Stay informed about policy changes. Immigration policy can shift, sometimes rapidly. Subscribe to reliable sources of information. The official sources include USCIS.gov for policy updates, CBP.gov for border procedures, and state.gov for visa bulletin and travel information. Follow reputable immigration law firms and organizations that provide free updates. And yes, channels like Entry Status USA that break down complex policy into understandable terms. Be careful about information on social media. Verify anything you see through official sources before making decisions based on it. There is a lot of misinformation circulating, and acting on false information can create real problems. Step 7. Know when to consult an attorney. You don't necessarily need a lawyer for routine travel, but there are situations where professional guidance is valuable. If you have been outside the United States for an extended period and you are concerned about whether you have maintained your residency, consult an immigration attorney before you attempt to return. If you have been pulled into secondary inspection and questioned about abandonment, especially if an officer has suggested you sign Form I-407, you should absolutely speak with an attorney before making any decisions. If you are from one of the restricted countries and you have pending applications that have been paused, an attorney can help you understand your options. A qualified immigration attorney can review your specific travel history, assess your ties to the United States, help you strengthen your documentation, and advise you on whether travel is advisable at a given time. The consultation fee is almost always less than the cost of trying to fix a problem after it has already happened. Section 5. What to expect at the border. Let me walk you through what the actual border crossing experience will look like under these new procedures so you are not caught off guard. When you arrive at a U.S. port of entry, whether that is an airport, land border, or seaport, you will proceed to the CBP inspection area. Under the new biometric system, your photo will be taken as part of the inspection process. At airports, this often happens at automated kiosks or at the primary inspection booth. At land borders, the officer will photograph you during the vehicle inspection or when you present your documents at the booth. The facial recognition system compares your live photo to the photo in your passport and immigration records. This happens almost instantly. If the match is successful and there are no other concerns, you will proceed through normally. This part usually adds just a few seconds to the inspection process once the systems are fully operational. However, if the system flags any discrepancies, or if the CBP officer has questions about your travel history or residency, you will be directed to secondary inspection. This is not necessarily a problem. Secondary inspection is a normal part of the border process and happens for many different reasons, from minor passport issues to random selection for enhanced screening. If you are sent to secondary inspection, you will wait in a designated area until an officer calls you. They will ask detailed questions about your trip, your travel history, where you live, what you do for work, why you were abroad, and when you are planning to return. They may ask to see additional documentation beyond your passport and green card. This is where having your documentation organized really matters. If they ask for proof of your U.S. address, you can immediately provide your lease or utility bills. If they ask about employment, you can show pay stubs or an employment letter. If they ask about ties to the United States, you can reference your tax returns, family connections, and property ownership. Answer all questions honestly and directly. Don't volunteer information they didn't ask for, but don't be evasive either. If you don't understand a question, it is okay to ask for clarification. If you are not sure about specific dates or details, it is better to say you don't remember exactly than to guess and be wrong. The secondary inspection can take anywhere from a few minutes to several hours, depending on the complexity of the situation and how busy the port of entry is. I know it can be stressful, but try to remain calm and patient. Getting frustrated or angry with the officers won't help your situation. In most cases, you will be admitted after secondary inspection. The officer will either determine that there are no concerns with your residency, or they will note any concerns but allow you to enter. Sometimes they will give you a verbal warning about the length of your absences and advise you to spend more time in the United States going forward. In rare cases, if the officer believes you may have abandoned your permanent residency, they might ask you to sign Form I-407. Again, you have the right to refuse. If you refuse, they can either admit you anyway, possibly with a warning, or they can initiate removal proceedings, which means you will go before an immigration judge. This is serious, and if it happens, you should request to speak with an attorney before making any statements or signing anything. For departures, the biometric process is simpler. At airports, your photo might be taken at the gate when you board your international flight or at a designated checkpoint before you reach the gate. At land borders, it happens when you exit the United States. This is primarily a tracking mechanism to record your departure date and doesn't typically involve questioning unless there is something unusual about your situation. Let me bring this all together. The immigration landscape for green card holders in 2026 has new elements, but the fundamental status and rights of lawful permanent residents haven't changed. You can still travel internationally and return to the United States. What is different is the technology and systems used to verify your identity and track your travel. The biometric entry-exit system is now mandatory for all green card holders at every port of entry. You will be photographed coming and going. This is primarily an identity verification system, not a new enforcement mechanism targeting travelers. The travel restrictions affecting 39 countries explicitly exempt green card holders. If you hold a valid green card, you can travel and return regardless of your nationality, though you may face enhanced screening if you are from one of the restricted countries. The rules about maintaining your permanent residency haven't changed. You are still expected to keep the United States as your primary home, maintain ties here, and avoid extended absences that could suggest you have abandoned your residency. The 180-day threshold for triggering additional questions has always existed. The one-year limit without a re-entry permit has always existed. What is new is the awareness of these rules due to all the recent policy attention on immigration. My advice is straightforward. Be proactive, not reactive. Document your ties to the United States now before you travel. Calculate your travel patterns honestly and adjust if necessary. Apply for a re-entry permit if you will need an extended absence. Keep organized records of your U.S. connections. Stay informed through reliable sources and consult an immigration attorney when you have specific concerns about your situation. The green card holders who will have the smoothest experience are those who understand these systems, prepare appropriately, and can demonstrate clearly that the United States is genuinely their home. Before I close, I need to give you the standard legal disclaimer. Everything I have shared in this video is for general informational and educational purposes only. It is not legal advice and should not be relied upon as such. Immigration law is complex, enforcement practices vary, and individual circumstances differ significantly. What applies to one person may not apply to another. If you have specific questions or concerns about your immigration status, travel plans, or how these policies affect you personally, you should consult with a qualified immigration attorney who can review your situation in detail. Always verify information using official government sources like USCIS.gov, CBP.gov, and state.gov. If this video helped you understand these important changes, I would really appreciate if you would give it a like and share it with other green card holders who need this information. Most people won't hear about these changes until they are at the airport, and that is too late to properly prepare. And if you want to stay updated as immigration policy continues to develop, subscribe to Entry Status US and turn on notifications. We track policy changes, court challenges, and implementation details, so you don't have to wade through hundreds of pages of Federal Register notices. Drop a comment below if you have questions about your specific situation. I read every comment, and while I can't give individual legal advice, I can point you toward resources and address common concerns in future videos. The immigration system can be complex and sometimes intimidating, but knowledge is power. The more you understand about how these systems work, the better equipped you are to protect your status and navigate the process confidently. Stay informed, stay prepared, and I will see you in the next update.